Ready? Okay. Good morning, everyone. What I'd like to be able to do right now is that unfortunately we do not have a finance committee quorum, so I will table the finance committee information until our next meeting. So with that, let's move on to the board meeting.
Well, good morning. We'll open the board meeting for Juvenile Welfare Board and begin with Mr. Butler leading us in a pledge. Our first order of business, if you're following along on the agenda, is item number 2, which is acknowledgements. And we're going to turn to Linda Leedy. And I think we're going to meet a couple of Cooperman Bogue winners.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. As you know, every year, the Juvenile Welfare Board honors frontline social service professionals who are out there really helping our children and families meet their everyday needs. And typically we give 4 awards a year, but this year in light of COVID-19, we're giving 12. And today we're here to present 3 of them. Our first award winner is Tiffany Brown. Tiffany has been with Pinellas County Multicultural Young Life for 5 years, mentoring, leading, and guiding youth who reside in the Ridgecrest community. Tiffany is described as a kid magnet who leads by example, forms strong relationships, and has built trust within her community as well as with the public school partners. When schools closed last March due to COVID-19, she distributed laptops and engaged her church in setting up education pods for children without the internet service at home, providing them with a safe place for remote learning. Plus, Tiffany secured tutors thanks to her relationships with teaching staff at their partner public schools. And when schools reopened in August, the partner school principals requested Tiffany's presence back on campus, largely due to her positive influence with students. Tiffany is truly a dynamo who makes Ridgecrest a better place for youth and their families. Thank you, Tiffany. Would you like to say anything?
Just stand up and wave to the crowd. This is truly an honor. Last week I was surprised with this award, and I'm still just it's truly a blessing just to serve your community, especially the community that you're born and raised in. So I'm just honored to be here today and just thank you guys. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next award winner is Maura Keane. Maura started with Gulf Coast Jewish and Family Community Services as a system navigator with JWB's Family Services Initiative, and recently transitioned to her new role as FSI Truancy Liaison. Maura is a resource guru who empowers families to take accountability for their child's education and achieve stability. During the pandemic, Maura was the lead FSI contact for JWB's Lealman and Asian Neighborhood Family Center, assisting families in navigating the daunting COVID CARES application process. In one instance, she worked with a young mother and baby who were homeless, helping address their immediate need for shelter. This mother is now gainfully employed, has stable housing, and her baby's in childcare. In the words of her supervisor, I truly believe that Maura's work is woven into the fabric of each story she helps families write. Congratulations, Maura. Thank you. And finally, Michelle Schaefer, Healthy Start Coalition of Pinellas. Now, actually, Michelle is not here today, but her supervisor and nominator, Cindy McNulty, is here on her behalf, as Michelle is taking a well-deserved vacation in the North Carolina mountains and is off the grid. Michelle's key duty with Healthy Start Coalition of Pinellas is to review infant death cases, share findings with the Fetal Infant Mortality Review Committee, and coordinate action steps to prevent future deaths. As such, Michelle has been an active member of JWB's Preventable Child Death Planning Team and a passionate champion of the Sleep Baby Safely campaign. Knowing that infants are at risk for sleep-related suffocation, Michelle, and this is true, we know this, keeps her phone by her side, responding at all hours to requests for free pack and plays through Healthy Starts Beds for Babies program. Throughout the pandemic, she worked tirelessly to distribute food to families, along with much needed diapers and hygiene items. Michelle truly leaves no stone unturned to ensure every baby has a healthy start. So on behalf of us, you can share our congratulations with Michelle. Thanks, Sydney. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that Michelle is a superwoman. I'm so honored to be your supervisor. She doesn't really need much supervision. Mountaintop up there, and I know Michelle. It's the most difficult work that was to meet with parents who lost a child and to offer help and counseling and to find that root cause. And with all of your help, with PAPO, the Beds for Babies program, one of the causes is unsafe space. And we just don't have a safe place. And it doesn't matter if they have one of our programs or not. That's what's key. They have one of our programs like Healthy Families that you find. They have the resources usually. But I think last year that bringing in something like that. And so the sleep-related deaths have gone down. So she is like the underdog. Sometimes I send her away as soon as the FEMA meeting is over and we post that cases and try to come up with interventions. I send her home. I go home for 2 days because it's grueling work, but it's probably the most important work that we need to do. So thank you for honoring her. So we appreciate her and appreciate all of you for all the work you do. Being on the board.
Thanks, Cindy.
Well, on behalf of the board, I can't thank you enough for the work that you do. And it's also very motivating for us to meet you and to hear about your work up close and personal. So I thank you very, very much. And just to let you know, you're welcome to stay for the entire meeting because we're going to get started with the business meeting. But I do know there's a photographer out in the lobby who may want to take some pictures before, the day is over. Okay. All right. For the board members that are here, I would call for a motion to accept the consent agenda item that's been presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. McCurrick. And second, thank you, Judge Moore. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very nice. This motion carries. So our action items, I'm actually going to have the right of changing the agenda a little bit. The action item A is to approve the expansion of food support for children to the St. Petersburg Free Clinic. I thought moving the presentation up would give us much more information to have before we make that vote. So I'm going to actually call on Beth Houghton to give us presentation A, which is the COVID-19 Emergency Food Purchase and Distribution Program.
And if I could make sure that we invite into the room Shayna Bent and Janet Hooper. Are they? I think they're out in the hall. Okay.
I see Janet.
I mean, when I
Come and take a seat, ladies.
thank you. When I introduce and hand it over, I'd like to have somebody at the other end. Very good. Well, welcome to you all, and I'm going to make a few introductory comments, and then we have folks in the room who can really tell you from a variety of perspectives what has gone on with food need and food relief over this last months and year. As we all know, the topic of acquiring and distributing food took on considerable prominence this year and continues to be vital for families in Pinellas County. As much as we would love to be able to predict exactly what the economy will do and how it will impact various segments of our community, that's difficult, and we do our best. I do want to sort of to set the stage with a short 2 minutes, honest, video that shows you the role of the neighborhood family centers in purchasing and distributing food during the pandemic.
Tens of thousands of students rely on the meals and food they receive.
Well, why don't you give it one more shot, Shannon? And if it doesn't, life will go on.
Somehow I suspect when you did a test run, it probably worked beautifully.
Yeah,
Of course.
Maybe do the presentation, I'll try to get it up.
Very, you bet. Very good. We will do that. Well, it's my, oh, yes, lights would be good. It's my privilege to not really introduce, because most of you know Janet Hooper, but to turn this presentation over to her. Janet is the executive director for the Maddie Williams Neighborhood Family Center, an extraordinary leader in that center in her community, and she's going to share some firsthand experience delivering this essential service on the front lines. Thanks, Janet.
Thank you, Beth, and good morning, everyone. On March 12th, we had to cancel our big event that would raise money for our food pantry. So not only did we lose the revenue, but we incurred expenses. Little did we know that 3 days later, we'd be closing the center. And then 4 days after that, we were going to have over 80 families looking for food. And we had to figure out how we were going to do it, and we had to do it quickly. Our first attempt, I will admit, wasn't real good, but it got people fed, and that worked. But as we moved through the summer, it became more increasingly busier every time we turned It's always good. It's always good to have friends, right? That'll help. And I still have some board members that do it. So we're delivering to about 22 households every week, every Thursday. In fact, it's going to happen today. Our food pantry is from 9 to 11 in the morning. And then from 12 to 2, we do the deliveries. And then from 5 to 6, we have a night pantry for those people who work. What had happened is we started at 80. That's what we were in February. And our highest was 133 families. We wound up having to buy another refrigerator. We wound up having to buy more food. When Aldi stopped allowing you to buy more than 2 gallons of milk, I couldn't get 50 of my friends to go get milk for us. So we went and got Borden to deliver, but we had to pay for it. And the same thing with eggs, because we like to give milk and eggs, give them a choice of milk and eggs every week. When the meat packing plants went down, now we have another problem because there wasn't any meat. There wasn't a lot of meat going through Feeding Tampa Bay. And so I called my friend David Wallace over at Oldsmar Cares, and I said, what do you think of this idea? Let's contact some of these restaurants who are doing curbside, and maybe they'll order meat for us, and then we can package it and give it out. And he had a restaurant up in Oldsmar, a Cuban restaurant that did it, and then the Safety Harbor Resort and Spa helped us as well. And so we were able to get meat out during the time when there wasn't as much available. So as we move forward, we kept growing and growing and growing and growing. And it took a lot of effort to try and manage all the food. It used to be a person would come in, they get their little shopping cart, they could pick what they wanted. And when we take the shopping cart out and put it in their cars. Now we had to prepackage all the food. So, and then we had to do it in a safe way, right? We couldn't have 20 people in the building. We could only have less than 10. And so it became a really time consuming process, but we have it down pat now. So on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, we're prepping the food, and on Thursdays, they come and get the food. The biggest issue we had was not having enough food. And so if we got a refrigerated van, we would be able to pick up at a local grocery store instead of going all the way to Feeding Tampa Bay. So we bought a refrigerator, we leased a refrigerated van, and we pick up from the Palm Harbor Publix grocery store. So then that created a whole nother problem, of course, because we had to pick up Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and our food pantry wasn't until Thursday. So what would happen to the food that wouldn't keep from Monday to Thursday? So I convinced my board that we needed to get a refrigerator, what we call the community fridge. And so we put food in there every day when it comes in, and people can come in anytime during business hours and pick up any food that they need that's in there for free. And that has really helped. It's been very popular amongst people, obviously, because they may not have a lot of space to store a lot of stuff. And we'll have meat in there that's been defrosted, or we'll have fresh fruits and vegetables. We also get, unfortunately, we get a lot of food that's already spoiled. And just so you know, we don't get rid of, we don't waste it. We don't throw it in the garbage. The dancing goat takes it and feeds all the animals, and we give it to composters as well. So we make sure that we use every piece, it stays being used. You know, and the reality is that even though our numbers, if you can see on the chart, they're dipping a little bit, and that's really the product of the stimulus checks and the child care tax credit money going to people. But we're already seeing it start to head back up in June. And the fact is, unless minimum wage goes up and food prices come down, you are going to continue to have way too many food challenged families. The Alice report before the pandemic hit already told you that 42% of the people in my area don't have enough extra money to be able to pay for an emergency of $400. When you see the food prices start cutting into that, you can tell that means that the food issue is going to be there. My vision for the van is that I want to work with Hispanic Outreach and Oldsmar Cares, because we know there are food deserts in our community, and we want to be able to get food out to them too. We're not there yet. We first got to handle the first issue, which is getting everybody taken care of, and then we'll try and see what we can work out. But that's where I come from. What I have to tell all of you as a board is how outstanding the Juvenile Welfare Board staff was through this whole pandemic. Because we were frontline workers, and yeah, everything was upset. We had to figure out new ways to do things, but so did they. They all had to work from home. They didn't miss a beat. They had Microsoft Teams meetings. They helped us with resources. They did all kinds of things to make us so that we could be successful. And you should be proud of the work that they did through this whole time, because it wasn't easy for any of us. I had a lot of volunteers that I depended on and to make it all happen. And fortunately, we had a base of support that did that. And the last thing I want to tell you, I've been an executive director for 13 years here. And the vision of, or the view of family centers has been up and down, right? There have been times, what do they do? How, we don't understand what you guys do. We don't understand what the value is. Let me tell you what the value was during the pandemic. You didn't have to build an infrastructure. You didn't have to find distribution sites. You didn't have to find ways to find trusted people to get information out to the community. You had them, because Brown and Spence made that vision a reality and put family centers in the neighborhoods where it was needed the most. And that allowed us to get food to those people who needed it the most, because the pandemic hit those that had the least to lose. It hit them the hardest. And so we were able to, thanks to you being the foundation, we were able to address it. You know, we served 10,000 adults last year, 6,000 kids just in our food pantry, not including the kids program that we did. And we had hit over 5,000 households just last year. And this year, the numbers are going to be even greater. And I'm unfortunately going to predict that it's going to continue to grow. So I want to thank you all for staying the course and understanding what an impact the family centers, and in particular in my center, was able to have on the community during a really difficult time. And now I'm going to turn this over to a very amazing COO. Shana, please come up from the St. Pete Free Clinic.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you for the amazing work that you do. My name is Shana Bent. I'm the Chief Operations Officer at the St. Petersburg Free Clinic. It has been my privilege to work there primarily in food programs for the past 9 years. Last year was our 50th anniversary of our organization, and what a way to spend it. But in some ways it seems fitting, as more challenges just provide more opportunities to step up and meet those. Childhood hunger was a problem before the pandemic began, but when it hit, schools closed, families had to make the choice of staying home with their children, often losing jobs or losing a source of income. And kids no longer had access to free meals at school, no hot breakfast at lunch every day. The problem of childhood hunger was quickly becoming a crisis. At the We Help Fresh Pantry, we were accustomed to seeing 150 to 200 clients per day. About 25% of those were families with children. But when COVID struck, we quickly pivoted, moving our pantry outside to a drive-through model. And with each passing day, the lines grew. It's 250, then 300, and then 400, until we hit our peak of 800 individuals and families a day. A number that I could never fathom or imagine, but the lines were there, stretching city blocks. If no one knew who we were or where we were before, downtown St. Pete certainly did now, based on, if nothing else, the traffic that we created. But we stepped up to meet those lines of cars day after day. We surveyed our clients to gain a better understanding of the incredible demand that we were seeing. We learned that half of the families were now families with children, where it was just a quarter previously. We also learned that half of them had never visited a food pantry prior to COVID. Many had lost jobs or had hours cut. And while demand was increasing exponentially, our supply was, for a time, plummeting. As a panicked community wiped the shelves of the grocery stores clean, the grocery stores no longer had excess food to donate to local food banks. Fortunately, our community and JWB stepped up with their support, allowing us to fill the gaps by purchasing food. We purchased food in bulk by the truckload. And when I say by the truckload, 40,000 pounds of bell peppers or 50,000 pounds of green beans at a time to distribute not only through our pantry, but through our over 50 community partners. In addition to my role at the Free Clinic, I've also served as the chair of the Childhood Hunger Initiative, something that I'm very proud of. This collaborative effort has yielded amazing results throughout the years, from networking, increasing the utilization of break spots, the expansion of Pack-a-Sack to every elementary school, and the teen food insecurity study, which prompted an amazing response from Pinellas County schools and quite frankly, changed the way that we feed children in this county. But this group has never been more valuable than the past year. It allowed sharing of resources, particularly resources for clients, which were quite frankly changing by the day, and having this organization collect those, group them together, and send out the almost daily emails of what we could provide our clients was invaluable. It allowed us to collaborate on responses from pop-up pantries to providing Pack-a-Sack in a COVID world to new food partnerships. And now we look at where we are today. While the grocery store shelves are no longer bare and our food donations began to level out, the demand has not gone away. We've seen a temporary dip, as Janet mentioned, partly due to income tax returns and stimulus checks. But even with this dip, we're still serving close to 400 families a day just in our pantry. We continue to provide food for over 70,000 individuals month after month through our partner network of other pantries. But families will soon feel the pinch of having children home from school, high utility costs, and rising prices of just about everything around us. While we don't expect to see 800 cars again, I do believe we've settled in at our new normal, which is twice of what we were seeing previously. So many of those who we're now serving are part of the ALICE population, a population that we sought to serve pre-pandemic with extended hours, with intentional outreach. Those families who were just making it before and likely needed our help, but were hesitant to reach out and receive it. And through the pandemic, they had no other choice. But what they discovered was that this is not the food pantries that they were used to. When they come to visit the fresh pantry, over 75% of the foods are fresh, fruits and vegetables, meat, eggs, and dairy, foods that families are familiar with and can enjoy. They're also discovered that coming to a food pantry isn't what they expected. They're treated with dignity and respect. It's also not just for those, it's for everyone. And I think that's one of the things we've realized is that now most people can say, I know someone who needed help during the pandemic and it's okay, which has allowed more people to seek help and really normalized it. That so many people in our county are in need of assistance, that even though there's food on the table, it's often not enough. It's not balanced, and it's often lacking fresh fruits and vegetables, something that families are now able to access through our pantry. And so I believe these families will be here to stay. We are incredibly grateful to JWB for their support throughout the pandemic and their ongoing dedication to ensuring that no child goes hungry. On behalf of the Free Clinic and all of our food partners, I want to say thank you with our sincere appreciation for everything you've done.
Thank you both. I think, I'd want to be clear that there are a lot of organizations, both our funded partners and many others, who have been part of this effort. But I think you just got really wonderful glimpses into two of the extraordinary organizations who have been part of this. But I would want to be clear, they're not the only ones by far. As Janet noted, our neighborhood family centers were there and ready to go. And to her point, there were phone calls every week between all the neighborhood family centers and our staff. And while we shared information we had and then immediately sent it out via email on where the next pop-up pantry was or what was happening with SNAP, through EBT cards so that they could better advise the people they already knew. They also shared amazing things with each other. So I can guarantee you that what Janet Hooper and Maddie Williams stood up there was copied and replicated and lessons learned. And those lessons couldn't be learned a year later. They needed to be learned right then, and they needed to be implemented right then. And both of these organizations are great examples of the infrastructure to some extent that was already there. You can't stand up a refrigerated warehouse and a group of, and a fleet of trucks and drivers on a dime. you can't create the access and trust in a community that Janet described, that all of our neighborhood family centers already had. And so, you know, even to the point, as she noted, and we noted with many of our programs, there were, if somebody hadn't been seen for a while, just as you would do with your own family or friends, you'd give a call and say, is everything okay? You know, what do you need? And it has often been said that Pinellas County is a resource-rich community, but a lot of times the information isn't easily accessible, or the referrals aren't always to the right place. And these are examples of where we broke a lot of those barriers down, because it's fine to have a lot of food, but we don't want food in the warehouse. We want food, as one of my board members used to say, in the tummies. I mean, unless it gets into the bodies, it really, you know, you don't want it rotting anywhere, you know, along the way and not accessible. So I want to thank both of you. Just wanted to kind of review, and some of these things we've, you know, you've already heard the real life part of, but during COVID and actually this is really through September 30th, these are things that you have already approved. JWB in one form or another invested a total of $1,675,000 in food. Positioned the Childhood Hunger Initiative as this hub that Shana talked about and I just talked about, for information sharing and need identification. Where were the gaps, so that we could find that out very quickly. And that group represents everything from food providers to school system, both in the social work area and in the food service area, and other organizations. And so you know, I wish Dr. Grego were here. I would want a real shout out to Lynn Geist, who runs the food services for Pinellas County Schools. Extraordinarily flexible and made a lot happen, and has always been a core member of that group. So double the number of break spot grab and go sites. Obviously, the Juvenile Welfare Board didn't do that. That really was the Pinellas County Schools. But again, they really shifted amazingly quickly. Distributed 1.5 million free meals for kids. We funded a new program. It was really, we funded the pilot, which you've heard, Meals on Wheels for Kids. Those families that really Janet described, and the Neighborhood Family Center just took it and did it, but who because of transportation, or perhaps a child who's immunocompromised and, you know, they weren't getting out anywhere else, needed food delivered. And so, you know, the Meals on Wheels model for seniors, and this was a way to use that same model. And then others have picked that up and continued to fund it. We invested a large part of the money that we're talking about here was to invest in what I would call 4 food banks or food hubs across the county. So the Shepherd Center in Tarpon Springs, HVA, formerly RCS, Food Bank in Clearwater, the Dream Center in Littleman, and St. Pete Free Clinic in St. Petersburg. And more than doubling their ability to buy food, and the significant food support that this board approved this last winter that went through the St. Petersburg Free Clinic went to those 3 hubs across the county. And I think we've learned that, as I said before, you can't stand up logistics in a minute and a half. And that last mile distribution is still not as strong as we might like it to be, particularly in Mid and North County. So the Free Clinic, as the buyer of truckloads of green beans, et cetera, has been ready and able to distribute and fill every need that a last mile provider has been able to come and pick up in Littleman. But there's I'm sure in 3 months and 6 months and a year, this story will be a bit different about how that capacity has increased as well. We also created a one-stop website because as both of our speakers noted, things were changing. It felt like every other day. And for those who were trying to advise families on a whole variety of issues, but in this case on food, had countless emails from different places, flyers, and, is this still in effect? Is that going to happen? Oh, that was last week, throw it out. And so our communications folks, in conjunction with Danielle Hens in our community area, who is the backbone, by the way, for the Childhood Hunger Initiative, kept an updated website so that anybody across the county could know what was available then. And that helped a great deal, and also promoted that on local news and on social media. And despite the fact that JWB has those resources, we did look and realize that part of what FEMA said they were reimbursing or funding was food assistance. We'll see, I guess is what I would say, but we did apply for reimbursement for food and other expenses we believe were squarely within the intention of that FEMA program. They're not used to what food need is in a pandemic. They get it when the Publix trucks can't come south to Pinellas County because the roads are closed and there just isn't food in the grocery store. So they denied our first attempt. We appealed it because we still think that that's their responsibility and it was appropriate. So I'll end there and am open for questions, but as Susan mentioned, we wanted to present this as background before we look at the action item, and I'll address that whenever you're ready for me to.
All right, seeing no questions, let's go on to the action item.
Okay. My team is recommending that the board approve a purchasing waiver, meaning we don't go through an entire procurement process, to award a 2-year agreement with the St. Petersburg Free Clinics Food Bank for a total of about $3.3 million beginning in fiscal year 2022. You have already approved funding through September 30th of 21, but we learned from frontline folks, as you just heard, that things are not going to be normal, whatever a new normal will be, for some time. And I know in speaking to many of you, it's also the lens that you're seeing in our community that it will be a period of time before we see normal. So this is for primarily for purchase and then distribution of food throughout the county. The Free Clinic stands ready to work really with any partner across the community that we know is distributing food to those who need it. And no, it's not okay to sell it out of the back of the truck, but so, there's some vetting that goes on. But other than that, it really is available both to backfill those resources in the 3 other food hubs and food banks that I described, as well as other smaller partners who might have the capacity. And Janet, spoke to the problem that the last mile folks have, both with space, just physical space to put the food, as well as refrigeration. So, I expect we'll continue to see more of that develop. So, we will continue to monitor the need, but our purchasing folks recommended a 2-year commitment. And as I've continued to talk with folks from the Free Clinic, it's obvious that knowing that you have that commitment for a period of time helps you stand up the logistics and work with partners, knowing that you don't want to go offer food and then in 6 months you don't have it anymore.
Mr. McGurk?
First, I'd like to commend you ladies for all the hard work that you continue to do. And I know Ms. Hooper, it's hard to say no to you if you ever ask for anything. so it's really important that, that you continue this work and that, and again, I commend you and thank you for all the hard work you've done. I'm going to be very supportive of our move forward with this proposed plan, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say with some caveats and concerns. We are the Juvenile Welfare Board. We are not the Family Welfare Board, and unless we want to change our role, we have to focus children first. And I understand this because of the pandemic, the issue here has just gotten out of hand. And it was out of hand before when it was just for the children. But it's gotten worse because of that. And I'd like to say that I'd like to see over the next couple of years, we need to reach out to all of us and really strong arm, if I would have to use those words, our local officials and state and even federal to step up to the plate here, and to focus in on the real issue, which is really driven to food, and feeding our families and feeding not only the children, but the families of our community, and giving everybody a chance to be, to be successful in their lives. We can argue over what's right in the minimum wage or not the minimum wage, depending on who you talk to, and what impacts are based on those that are asking for more and those that have to pay it. And I think you've already seen McDonald's response to some of that, which is not quite what we'd hoped they'd do. But automation will come and play, and that will mean less jobs. So I don't want to get into that part, but I would like to really, really focus in on that. We've got to stand up and reach out to our broader leadership and say enough's enough, and really start to focus in on how do we ensure that the people of Pinellas County are given the opportunity to feed themselves, or we help in any way to help subsidize feeding them, and that we ensure that no one goes hungry. I really would hate to see, Ms. Hooper, your center turn into the next Publix, but it's kind of done that. Okay, and I'm surprised they haven't tried to buy you out yet. But that's important. I think we really have to do that jointly. But again, as I said, I will be very supportive of this effort.
I have one comment before we call for the motion. I think there was something that Beth said about the infrastructure with the other food banks that you're supplying, that it wasn't as smooth and efficient as the food distribution out of St. Pete Free Clinic. And so I guess that's something I would like to see monitored and improved with available resources from the St. Pete Free Clinic that is receiving this financial benefit to buy the food in bulk purchases and distribute the food. But I think it's been said by both of you, it will only work if it gets in the tummies, but it needs to get, I'd like the expression, that last mile. We need to make sure that we're improving that infrastructure to get the food streamlined through. And I also agree with Mr. McCurrick's point that certainly I will support the two-year request, but during that time, I would like to see not only the infrastructure improve, but also working with government, broader group of government agencies with the data that would be provided regarding who we're serving, who's continuing to be served past COVID in the next couple of years, and who should really be coming to the table to pay for that. No pun intended. Ms. Malo?
I just have one comment. I would mimic Mr. Merrick's comments, and that I'd like to see the focus. I support it completely, but I would like to see the focus be on children and partnerships with the agencies that support children. And so it's a very limited resource, as you well know, and there's a lot of mouths to feed with that. And so I just would like to see the effort and the focus be on organizations and partnerships that would first focus on children and then secondary to the families.
Thank you so
may.
much for all your work. I have to say, you really pulled through and helped a lot of people, and I know that. So I'm sorry,
Judge Moore?
I see it different than Mr. McCurrick and Ms. Malo.
Because if you don't feed mom and dad as well with the children, then I see them. And so, yes, we are the Juvenile Welfare Board, and I don't want it to be a play on words. But then the parents come into my courtroom for abuse, abandonment, neglect if they don't eat. And so, yes, there should be a system of checks and balances to make sure that no one is just taking advantage of what is going on. I don't want the fact that we are the Juvenile Welfare Board to forget the fact that without the parents, if we can't help the parents, then we're always going to need to help the kids. And so, yes, we could focus for just the kids, but if mom and dad is hungry, I assure you they're not going to go to work. If mom and dad is hungry, I assure you that that abuse is going to happen to those kids that we just fed. So I see it with a different lens, and I want to say thank you for doing what you do.
That's why our board members are so, we're grateful for you to see everything through a different lens. Ms.
I mean, I totally agree with Judge Moore that that's important. And that's why I asked early on that we really focus in on working with others and to get our government officials to understand that it's clearly a much broader problem that we have to deal with. But again, I'll go back to, without seeming like it's playing on words, we are the Juvenile Welfare Board. We were created to protect and support the children. And we have to walk that fine line. This was one of those where, the fine line becomes blurred because of the issues that Judge Moore just said. But we are going to have to, over these next 2 years, really take a good hard look and work very closely with others to make sure that our funds are used properly as part of, and we can bridge a gap for a while, but we can't do it forever. And we owe that to the taxpayers of this community.
I just wanted to point out, there's probably less difference at this table than one might think. When we talk about what it means to be in the core space of our mission, and we talk about what that means for the Juvenile Welfare Board, we always say children and their families, because children don't exist alone. So, there are, when we look, for instance, at food, we look at it going to, the kids don't walk in the door and pick up the food. It's their parents that do, or their grandparents who are raising them that do. And we support children and families with minor children. So to your point, there are a lot of other people, another 50% of folks who don't meet that criteria. And we care about that, but that's not our response. That's not our mission and our responsibility. But it is to assure that families are stable and children are fed. Mr. Bartley.
I agree with Mr. McCurrick to a certain point. The food with the families and the children, I think, is appropriate, because you do got to get that food to them, and you do it through the family. So the family eats, the kids eat. And that's certainly the way it should be. But my concern is, as far as the future, and as I understand this, we'll go for 2021 till 2023, the 2-year cycle. Okay. And that's September on, is creating and filling a void. And don't get me wrong, that's necessary in the community. And that is the average family that's not a family as far as having children. It's just the people, feeding the people to eat. And then they have become accustomed to depending on our funding and our services for them to have food. And then at some point in time, we're going to sit down and revisit this and say, now do we pull back because the economy's either gotten better, or we keep going because it's a lot worse, but we're losing our focus now and going to doing just exactly what Mr. McCurrick was talking about. We're feeding everybody, which isn't our responsibility. So I don't know how to limit in the distribution process so that it does only affect the families with children, as opposed to the other people. I mean, it's hard to turn them away if they come in, they're hungry and they're needy. And I get all that, but the longer we do this, the more likely we are to create the dependency in the community on our funding. And that does kind of give me some concern. Don't misunderstand. I'm 100% for taking care of the families and children, as Judge Moore indicated, but that's just kind of, I can see that approaching down the road when we have this conversation later on.
Yeah, and if I could clarify, I didn't mean children to the exclusion of families. I mean, you can't just give but I think if you're collecting data along the way, you've had a great opportunity to look at some of the statistics and some of the data and who are we feeding. And so I think if we continue to do that as we go forward over the course of the 2 years, we can see there's certain centers that do feed children with families with children. And there's certain centers that probably have a different population that they're feeding. So like St. Vincent's de Paul probably isn't a family-oriented feeding place, whereas the Highland Center may be. And so I just think we keep those things and be mindful of those distribution centers. And if we can collect information along the way so that we can make better choices to support the families and not necessarily adult individuals, because there's plenty of those, as I well know as a public defender, that are hungry too. So that was my only point.
Thank you. All right, at this moment, I'll call for our board to make a motion to approve this.
So move.
Seconded.
And a second, Ms. Malo, thank you so much. All in favor?
Aye.
This motion carries. What I think we'll do now is come back to the agenda, and we are on item 4, our action item B, which is to approve the FY21 advance fund request, and I believe it has to do with Shirley Proctor Fuller. So
Yes.
Laura, that's to you.
Thank you very much. So as you're aware, at a previous board meeting, the board approved the expansion of the program with Shirley Proctor Fuller Foundation, specifically with its Master Kids program. And because of that, the expansion was primarily going to occur during the summer months. And so as a result, from a cash flow perspective, there was additional cash that's going to be needed. And as we're all aware that we're on a cost reimbursement type of arrangement with our agencies. So they have requested an advance of $100,000, which is within our board policy and is the maximum amount. And this would be able to address the cash flow needs over the summer. In addition to just reminding you, when we changed from the grants management program system, no longer can the agencies request the reimbursements every 2 weeks. Now that shifted to a monthly thing. So that coupled with the expansion of the program requires an additional cash flow. The advance, of course, will be needed to be repaid by the end of September, which was again what our policy is. And so we're here to ask approval from the board for that advance.
I look to the board members for any questions, concerns about this item, or call for a motion. Do you want to put your microphone
Yeah,
on, Mr.
I
Bartlett?
might
Thank you.
perhaps not be understanding this correctly, but it just seems to me to be an inordinate amount of money for $100,000, which represents approximately 2 weeks worth of program expenses. I mean, that is a heck of a lot of money for 2 weeks worth of program. That, I mean, to completely continue to fund that, it's a tremendous amount of money.
Well, the 2 weeks is specifically identified in the summer months. So it's not as if you take the total program for the year and divide it by 12 months. You're not going to do the math to come up with that. But they're adding an additional 100 children over the summer with the expansion. Last year at that time, they had about 35, 40 children. Now we're back to normal. So it's a big cost to them. And the 100,000 is going to be able to help them through the rest of the year, but helping them primarily with the summer months.
Okay, so with that 2 week time period, I mean, $50,000 a week. I mean, that's a lot of money that can be done with that for 100 kids. It's still, if you
Correct.
do the goes into, that's a lot of money per child.
Correct. So I think that the expansion is part of the need for the advance. Some of it has to do with changing the cycle on how they can request reimbursement instead of bi-monthly to monthly. And then on top of that, they had received a $100,000 capital award. And of course, that's on a cost reimbursement basis as well. So I think coupled with all of those things, they were asking for the maximum amount, which was 100,000.
Beth?
I was just going to say, I had looked at that very question, after some discussion, and I think we sort of misspoke in the memo. You have expense, as Laura Brock just said, we have expenses that go literally as long, or reimbursed as long as 6 weeks after they're incurred, up to 2 weeks after they're incurred by the time they get the check. And we've got these other issues. But I did look at, to your point, Mr. Bartlett, do these numbers make sense? And another look at that, even though we looked at it and this board had approved it previously.
Commissioner McCure?
Okay, just again to clarify, they've taken what was 40 to 50 children to 100 children,
No, 100 additional children.
100 additional to that. So it'd be 150 children now
And all day.
and all day versus what was a half a day prior to, wasn't it? And on top of that, they have been very successful in what they've done. We were very critical of them early on in the beginning, not sure whether they could accomplish what they said they would do. And they've exceeded those questions that I personally, and I believe others had. I think it's an excellent program, and I'd like to see them expanded even more. Yes, it's a lot of money, but it appears to be in a short period of time, but I think it spreads out over a broader period. And it also pays for what I think is, kind of a ratcheting up to get to the level of being able to care for and support those 150 versus what was 50. I struggled with the numbers as well, but as I looked and thought through this and really understanding it from a business perspective, that it takes a bit of cost to ratchet up. I think it's definitely a worthwhile program. And so I do support it.
So do I hear a motion to approve this agenda item?
So move.
So moved. And a second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Judge Moore. All in favor?
Aye.
This motion carries. So the sidebar conversation over here was to request a 2-minute break in our meeting so that.
It might work, but we won't know until we try it.
Right. We have a additional video to show during this meeting. We're not necessarily going back to the food video, but would like to take a break, just a moment or two, to reboot our technology to see if we can get our videos working.
Go with it because it's playing, that introduction.
If you think back to April in 2020, I'm sure you remember it being a stressful time. And now imagine another layer on top of that, a cultural and language barrier. That is what we were dealing with the families that we work with at the Hispanic Outreach Center. And we saw our role as really beginning to level the playing field by breaking down the barriers to provide education, support, and encouragement for the families that relied on us. The Hispanic Outreach Center has been serving Hispanic and Latinx families in Pinellas County for over 20 years. When COVID hit, we knew that we could not do it alone, and we relied on our strong partnerships. Together with the Juvenile Welfare Board and Pinellas County, we formed the task force Abrazo a la Distancia, which means a virtual hug. We called it that because that's exactly what we did. We wrapped our arms in a virtual hug around our families to provide resources and support for them during COVID-19. We were able to retrain our families on technology and online education platforms with Pinellas County Schools. We were able to distribute PPE, masks, sanitizers, and other supplies, especially to frontline workers and those in high-risk jobs. We were able to start providing fresh food and produce to families through a drive-through format. We also had a number of monthly webinars and forums in Spanish and in English that allowed us to connect with the families and share important information on issues such as evictions. We even held a virtual party before going back to school with the students, where they created their own masks. As one of JWB's 8 neighborhood family centers, we remain committed to supporting our families throughout COVID-19 and beyond.
Well, in a moment, you'll see the star of that video. You've heard a lot about the neighborhood family centers and their role with food and how they pivoted and all the rest. On top of that, one in particular had the additional challenges of language and culture to bridge those gaps and bridge them quickly. So to introduce one of our key partners, I'd like to ask Yadiris Garcia, our Community Planning Manager for JWB.
Good morning. My name is Yadiris Garcia, Community Planning Manager, and it is a pleasure to be here with you today and introduce one of our partners. Everything that has happened this morning, it speaks about flexibility, and that's exactly what the neighborhood family centers are so good about. Pivoting and making sure that the services are still provided in the community. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you Jacqueline Bolen. She is the Executive Director of the Intercultural Advocacy Institute, and I have the pleasure of working with her for the last couple of years. So Jacqueline, take it away.
Thank you and good morning. It is a pleasure and honor to be here with all of you this morning on behalf of the Hispanic Outreach Center and all of the neighborhood family centers. The Hispanic Outreach Center is one of 8 of the Juvenile Welfare Board's neighborhood family centers who have remained open, serving the community throughout the pandemic. And for years, as Janet said, we have been serving our unique communities around the county and neighborhoods that need it most. And I think COVID was really an example of how a crisis became an opportunity for us to work together, to co-locate and collaborate with partners to provide food, after-school programs, assistance, and much more. And as you can see on the slide, this really is a snapshot of the work that we have done. We could look at each of the neighborhood family centers individually and see an impressive number of achievements and children served. And if we look at that group together, which are these numbers, which is the collective, I think what it shows is the bigger collective impact. As we have the trust and established networks in our communities, partners like the health department reached out to us to provide vaccines, over 3,000 vaccines in total, really in support of their equity efforts to reach minorities and other hard to reach communities. And so the neighborhood family centers partnered together to provide these vaccines, and we cross-referred to each other's centers for clients and families, including serving the deaf and hard of hearing community, the Asian and Hispanic communities as well. We also partnered with the FSI navigators through Gulf Coast Jewish and Family Services and PEMS, who co-located at our NFCs in the very beginning of COVID to provide rental assistance so families could stay in their home. And we did all of this with the support of each other. I think that was really the key for us, that we had weekly meetings with facilitated by our senior program consultant, Felicia Pazana, and all of the other JWB staff who supported us weekly and now bi-weekly in these meetings to share ideas, successes, to brainstorm and group think so we could be better together. And one thing that really we have seen and learned in the past 15 months that I know all of you know as well is that the pandemic has affected us all, but not equally. And at the Hispanic Outreach Center, we knew this and really leaned into our values of connection, trust, responsibility, and collaboration to tailor our approach and response to COVID to support our Hispanic children and families. And our team, I'm so proud of how they really rose to this challenge to find creative solutions. And one of those solutions that I think of is the Abrazo a la Distancia task force that we led in partnership with the Juvenile Welfare Board and Pinellas County Human Services, which really grew out of the second week of lockdown and quarantine and trying to find ways to serve our families. And that initiative led us to put on over dozens of workshops in Spanish with all of our partners, support local Hispanic businesses, supporting them in Cinco de Mayo, buying tacos to give to all of our frontline workers, police officers, and first responders, and of course, to put on events and activities for our families. And really the heart behind our task force efforts was partnership and collaboration. COVID isolated us and separated us, but it did not stop us from doing the work that needed to be done. And through that work, the greatest lesson that I have learned through the past months with our families is that I want to share with you is this, that throughout the pandemic, the Hispanic community has taken the moments of stress, of change, and of hardship, and really turn those into opportunities, relying on their strengths and their assets for the better. And I could go into more of the numbers, but what I really want to share with you is some stories beyond the numbers. There was an incredible need for food, which you have heard as well, and we turned that into a leadership opportunity and community engagement, volunteer opportunity for our Hispanic youth, one of whom is here today with us, Jocelyn, with her mom, who you'll hear from shortly for her experience, where she volunteered at over 60 food distributions that we've had at the center. More time at home turned into families spending more quality time together, and we provided popcorn and snack packs for families to pick up at the center to go home and watch a movie with us over Zoom. Lack of access to masks early on turned into an opportunity for families to be creative, to make their own masks through materials provided by the center and other donors. Layoffs early in the pandemic from restaurants, hotels, and other manufacturing industries where many of our parents work left families without work. And this motivated and empowered families to learn new skills. For example, our jewelry and craft program led a mother to learn sewing. She now makes and sells blouses, beautiful, colorful blouses, and uses the money to support her children. Those suffering from anxiety and depression struggled with social isolation, but found support through our weekly virtual therapy sessions with our bilingual therapists through Directions for Living. The sessions, for example, were one reason that a woman was able to keep her job and manage the loss of her best friend due to COVID. Hesitancy, fear, and distrust of the vaccine in our community turned into connection and community through vaccine clinics at the center, where we vaccinated over 500 Hispanic individuals with the Department of Health's Health Equity Task Force, and gave us a better understanding of our community's motivation to get the vaccine, which is linked to family, with a son coming in saying, "When will I be able to get my vaccine? I just want to hug my mom." A 70-year-old abuela, grandma, saying that she's getting the vaccine so she can go back to Mexico this summer to see her family that she hasn't seen for over 2 years, and encouraged others in her community to do the same. These are just some of the stories behind the faces that you see in the video. And they are examples of how our Hispanic families have been and continue to be resilient. I know there are many more stories out there like this from other funded agencies, including the neighborhood family centers. So I'm proud to be here today in front of you to share our team and our community's hard work. When we were out in the field, the staff and the volunteers of the Hispanic Outreach Center received countless bendiciones, or blessings, every time we gave food bag, masks, PPE. And I am proud to be here today to pass those blessings onto you, the Juvenile Welfare Board and staff, for all of your support and leadership to the Hispanic Outreach Center, to the neighborhood family centers, and all of the partner agencies that you fund that we also worked with throughout the past 15 months. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for that heartfelt story. There's a lot of hope in the community. And when I think about hope, I think about youth. And right now at the Juvenile Welfare Board, we are revamping our Youth Leadership Committee. And I have the pleasure to introduce to you one of those youth. She's a member of the Youth Leadership Committee. But before I do that, the foundation for this strong leader and advocate is because of her parents. And yesterday I received a phone call and the person asked me, can mom come to the meeting? Because she wants to see her daughter speaking. And I was delighted. I didn't even have to say, yes, of course. So my pleasure and I get emotional because that's a strong foundation for this young lady. Gracias, señora Alejandra Guerrero, por estar con nosotros este día. Now, I would like to introduce to you Jocelyn Bashkahai. Jocelyn is an active student at the Hispanic Outreach Center Youth Leadership Program, who has just graduated from high school and plans to begin a career in early childhood development at SPC Clearwater. Jocelyn has proven to be a leader of excellence in the youth program offered by the Hispanic Outreach Center. She was recognized as the Leader of the Year 2020 for her hard work during the pandemic. She led actually all the youth leadership program during the pandemic, and she was instrumental in the development of programs that impact and recognize the needs of the youth by leading initiatives such as the JWB Youth Leadership Committee, as I mentioned before, and the food distribution that serves more than 300 people weekly. She's also a strong leader and advocate for her community by leading the students volunteers during COVID vaccination center events. And she was one of the first youth to actually get vaccinated. And she motivated me to get my vaccine. So Jocelyn, thank you.
Muchas gracias, Ms. Yaridis, for that nice introduction. It is an honor to be here with you representing the youth in the Hispanic Outreach Center. I have been part of the Hispanic Outreach Center for 8 years. I was only 10 years old when I started going, and it has become an extension of my family. Being part of the after-school program and summer camps has led me to work at the center and give back to my community. Over the years, I have participated in the youth leadership program and various other events, such as the annual back-to-school event, taking care of kids during their parents' English classes, working with the youth committee to plan outreach activities, also the food drive since the pandemic started back in March, as you can see in the photo on the left, and also vaccination events, as shown on the picture on the right, where I was one of the first youth to get vaccinated in my community. I'd also like to share what was the most surprising thing about the food distribution. It was seeing the parking lot filled with cars. Our parking lot can hold about 50 cars, and each car can hold about 2 to 5 families picking up food from our distribution site. It was amazing to see how many people needed help. The first week, 159 families showed up. The next week, 200. This showed me how important this service was and how incredibly grateful people were. So a big thank you to the board on behalf of the youth in the Hispanic Outreach Center for funding this important initiative. As Ms. Yaridis mentioned, I am also getting ready to go to SPC to study early childhood education and development, helping to shape young minds in order No, sorry. Helping to shape young minds is so important, and I hope to become a teacher. So maybe I will have the opportunity to return later when I graduate and share my experiences with you. Gracias.
If you have any questions.
Mr. McCurrick.
I just want to thank you for all the hard work that you've done and how you supported the community and what you've done. And you can see I'm tearing up because of it. It is so amazing to see young people like yourself who are stepping up and who are really caring about the community that they live in. And so we want to thank you for what you've done and wish you much success in the future.
Ms. Malo.
Congratulations on your graduation. I look forward to hearing stories from your teaching career. You're going to be magnificent and you must be a very proud mother.
Well, this was a feel-good presentation, and Yaya, a special thanks to you. I know all your hard work on behalf of JWB touches this community in many ways.
Thank you.
So I would be remiss not to recognize Yaya.
Thank you.
Well, okay, Laura, follow that with the budget forecast and presentation.
But don't
So-
make anybody cry, okay?
I'm not sure our guests want to stay for the budget presentation. You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome to exit.
But the board members, you stay put.
Yes, so very, very heartwarming presentations that we've heard all day today, and I'm here today to discuss the numbers. So I'll be presenting the budget presentation for the millage, and this will be a short presentation. I just want to remind you that Monday at the Finance Committee meeting, we will be presenting the detailed budget that we'll be going through and also reviewing the millage rate as well. But Shannon, if you want to, so here's the first, here we're talking about the budget timeline. And I know that's kind of hard to read, but the budget actually started back in February. We started looking internally, our department started looking at the budget, but it wasn't until June where we got the information from the county's office relative to the estimated taxable values on the properties. So today, here we are discussing a draft of the budget presentation. July 1st is when we will get the certification of the taxable ad valorem amount. So we'll have a better idea based on July's numbers than what we have now already for the estimates. We will be presenting at the July 8th board meeting, which is where you will be approving the millage rate. So the July 8th is an important meeting. We need to definitely have a quorum at that meeting because that's the date that we will approve the millage. August 3rd is when we will have to certify that and send that into to the county. At this point, right now, we have a Finance Committee meeting scheduled for August 26th. So that would be to discuss if we have any changes or modifications that we would have to the budget. And then September 8th, we'll have a board meeting at 3:30. We have the first trim hearing that same day at 5:15. The September 22nd will be the final trim hearing. And then, of course, the budget will be adopted and effective October 1. So here's a little history on the millage rate. And we've had a lot of discussion of that over the last, as long as I've been here, which has been just over a year. But the millage rate currently is 0.8981, and it's been at that rate since fiscal year 13. And so we decided to go back and kind of see what the impact or what it's looked like for the past 5 years in comparison with some information we received from the county relative to the average home taxable values. So you can see back in 2016, the average home taxable value was 121,000. And now in 2020, that amount is 162,000. What we've seen here is about a $40,000 increase or about a 34% increase
over the past 5 years. And that equates over to the paid amount to JWB. Of course, since the millage rate has remained stable for all those years, you would expect to see that the increase on the amount paid to JWB from 109 back in 2016 to 146 would also be a 34% increase. And this is showing the change in that amount each year. Next slide. So this is a little different slide as well. And normally you would look at your unrestricted fund balance as a percentage of your expenditures. And that's a number that we keep track of and we constantly look at, especially when we're looking at reserves. What this chart depicts is a little different. So the solid numbers, which is on the bottom part of the bars, is what the budgeted ad valorem revenues have been. And so you can see over the past several years, that bottom part has increased over a period of time. And the dollar amounts are in there as well. For example, in fiscal 16, the ad valorem revenues was $55 million. Now, if you look at the blue column, which is what we're estimating for fiscal 22, that amount is $84 million. And then projecting out, which would be the far right chart on the green, is 94 million based on what we're projecting the increases. And we follow in line pretty much what the Pinellas County is doing. If you look at the top part of the bar chart, which is the shaded area, that's the amount of our unrestricted fund balance. And I will point out that that unrestricted includes both the 2-month reserve that we account for, in addition to all the remaining unrestricted fund balance. So if you look at that combined, going back again to fiscal 16, that amount was $17 million. And then that's increased over the years. The increase between 16, 17, 18 is pretty similar in correlation to the ad valorem revenues. And again, you're normally not looking at unrestricted fund balances as it relates to revenues, but this is just something we wanted to take a look at. When you get into fiscal 20, you can see that those numbers are starting to grow. And then obviously in fiscal 21, which was we're estimating that unrestricted amount will be at about $34 million. So our concern is going forward, and again, we've had this discussion, is, why are we continuing to absorb and increase this unrestricted fund balance? We've got to put it to use. Or do we consider looking at the millage rate to determine if there needs to be an adjustment or a change in that regard? So looking at this, there would be discussion as to relative to how long is COVID going to continue. You heard discussions this morning relative to continuing needs in the food area, in the neighborhood family services area, as well as the new initiatives that we've adopted relative to the strategic plan regarding 0 to 3 and all these other areas that we're working on. So we're very diligent in looking at that, but this is just trying to depict ad valorem revenue dollars in comparison with the unrestricted fund balance. So again, speaking of the ad valorem dollars, so our budget for fiscal 21, it was 78 million. And if you remember, we calculated a collection percentage of 95%. 95 is the lowest amount that we are able to certify, but we're back to 97 for fiscal 22 because what demonstrated in the past was it didn't drop to 95%. We were thinking that people may not be able to pay their taxes. And as a result, we took that step and maybe perhaps thinking that we would have a decrease or maybe not a full collection in that respect. But with the increase that we're hearing or we're projecting, we would see about a $6.6 million increase in ad valorem taxes. The other source of revenue for us is our interest. Interest has not been, our return on investments has just been nominal. And even though we had dropped that number to 650,000 this fiscal year we're in, just to let you know, the previous year it was 950,000. We're projecting that it would be 100,000 for next year. And I think that's more in line with what the actual numbers have occurred. But overall, our revenues for next fiscal year would be estimated to be increased by $6 million. So on the program side, we're seeing that the program continuation, and that would be all the programs that we are currently funding. It would also include the COLAs that we're estimating that would be calculated or attributed or provided to those allocated dollars. And you would look at that and say, well, how come it's decreasing? It's, we're saying it was 73 million too, and then we're projecting it's going to be 72.8. But you have to remember that we've defunded the Quali program, and that was $2.9 million. We're also not budgeting for the Pinellas County Foundation. That was a one-time funding of $3 million. And so even with the expansion of funds and programs that we've talked about, with the decrease of these two major areas, we're seeing a net decrease in what our programs would be for next fiscal year. Now, in the future programming, that's where we're talking about the 0 to 3 initiatives and some of these other areas. And so, of course, we're budgeting 2.5 million for fiscal 22. But when we get to the next chart, we'll see on the forecast where we're ramping that up and we're budgeting a substantial higher amount in fiscal 23. In the RFA for capital and technology, we are budgeting $1,750,000. That's a little bit more than what we had ended up with last fiscal year or this current fiscal year. If you recall, we came to you and asked for an increase in that amount to be able to accommodate all the applications that had received the 65 points that they needed in the grading scale. We're hopeful that a lot of the funded agencies will apply for technology to be able to advance, whether it's due to COVID or whether to keep track of their data or so forth, but we're really encouraging them to take advantage of that. Of course, we welcome any applications that we get, and we vet through that through the evaluation committee that we have. On the contingency side, we are proposing $1 million contingency as well for next fiscal year. That's just to have a placeholder in case we feel like there's a need that we might need to dip into that or use it. And as what's demonstrated in the past year, we did utilize quite a bit of that contingency dollars as well. On the administrative side, our salaries, we're proposing an increase of FTEs or full-time equivalents of approximately 6 folks. And we're busy now trying to identify where those positions would lay. We want to be postured to be able to, when we implement these new programs and initiatives, that's not the time when we should be hiring folks. We should be bringing them now. We're looking at the budget and procurement area. We're looking at program areas. We're looking in the HR area. We're looking in the communications department. So we're trying to ramp up and be prepared and ready to be able to issue those RFPs, get those procurements out, get the program managers up to speed so that when we implement these programs and start funding them, we're up and running. We won't have that time frame in between to, now we've allocated and awarded a contract. Now let's sit down and look at what the parameters are and the guidelines and the benchmarks. We want to have staff up to speed. We always look at our administrative rate, and even with the increase of those full-time equivalents, that would keep us at an administrative rate of 7.67%. Our target is to have less than 10%. So that keeps us within that guideline. On the budgeted forecast of millage, and this is kind of hard to read, of course, but on the top part, we're showing what our beginning fund balance was. So we carry forward from the prior year the total amount of our beginning fund balance. We add to that what the property tax ad valorem monies are that we are anticipating. And then we've got the other revenues, which includes interest and Cooperman's Bow contributions that we receive. So when we look at all of that collectively, and I'm looking at the column for projected fiscal 22, we would have total resources available to us of $127 million. Now, revenues would represent 85 million of that, but with the carryover from the prior year unrestricted fund balance, as well as the lapse monies, that gives us 127 million that we would have available to spend. Now, if you look at the expenditures areas, we've got the administration, the non-administration, that includes the statutory fees that we have to pay. That includes our internal technology and our performance measures. So that's a small amount. And then our program continuation. So these would be the allocated funds that we have looked at and determined as far as the ones that would be continuing. This includes the expansions that we approved that would be effective next year as well. And so that amount is at $71 million. We've got the program COLAs, and to remind you on the COLAs, we considered fiscal 20 as an outlier year. And so we took an average of what the previous 3 years lapse have been to come up with what we felt like the appropriate percentage of COLA increase would be for the programs, as opposed to just giving everybody a flat 3%. If they've lapsed money, which means they haven't spent all their dollars, there would be really no reason to give them an increase. And so that was kind of the way that we've done that. And we did it last way for fiscal 21, and the calculation was done the same for the current year. For future programming, as I indicated earlier, we are projecting a $2.5 million future programming for fiscal 22. And if you look at the next column for fiscal 23, that number increases dramatically to 6.7 million, 7.5. And that's where we are anticipating next fiscal year 22 to send out an RFA, a request for an award, to the general community. And this is a discussion that we've had to get a sense for what programs and what gaps might be needed for us to fill. It's my understanding that we did this back in 2016, and we got an overwhelming response request of something close to $10 million in requests. We certainly want to take a look at this to be able to put parameters in place that would identify what our focus areas are, what perhaps our geographic areas would be that we're interested in. But we'd like to hear from the community to have them tell us, and there might be some eye-opening discovery that we find that a need that we're not meeting, or something, a program that we hadn't thought about. But we want to move forward in that direction, possibly sending out that RFA in the fall, and then that way being able to implement and get it started an issue. But again, that's another year out. Future programming, again, we've got the contingency for this fiscal year 22, $1 million, and then that number would drop. So you're seeing what the total expenditures are, you're seeing what the projected surpluses are. And then the other number to just kind of highlight is your unrestricted fund balance, which is what I spoke about earlier on the bar chart. So that number for fiscal 22 is at about 36%. And if we go with the projections that we have, then that number would still be at 35% for fiscal 25. So we're trying diligently to look at our resources and to spend them wisely, making sure that, you know, that they're accountable for the funds that we're providing. But this is a challenge that we have, and we're well aware of that. And we want to make sure that our calculations are in line with that. So in conclusion, future programming are included to be completed through fiscal 25. That's our goal relative to the strategic plan. We are recommending that we keep the millage rate for fiscal 22, but we certainly want to look at that and revisit that for fiscal 23. So having said that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Seeing no lights, I do have a comment.
I have a question.
I had an opportunity to chat with Laura
I'm
this
sorry,
week.
I do
Oh,
have a question. And I'm going to assume that the reasoning behind not discussing and reducing the millage rate now, because ever since I've been on the board, there's been a concern that we're carrying over too much money. And before we didn't want to do anything with the millage rate because we were coming out of the recession. Am I assuming that the COVID is the reason why we just want to wait to see? Okay.
I nodded, I should say, yes.
And I also would put into the mix, and it lead to my comment, is that we've just approved a new strategic plan, pretty aggressive, with 2 new strategic focus areas. And I've been excited about getting ready to roll out that 0 to 3. And we will need money to do that. And that comes back to my point. Laura and I spoke on the phone this week about QWELI. So you began your presentation talking about defunding QWELI from prior years. And when we heard last month, the presentation from our newest executive leader on the 0 to 3, Barbara, thank you so much. And one of the issues I have is if we're going to put our new QWELI with new research guidelines and new efforts, additional staff to monitor that closely, My point, at some point we'll come back to the board, I would like to see us, if we are successful, improve the impact of that. There would be no reason that we couldn't replicate that and open additional Quelly sites in between now and 25. And so I'm seeing lots of nods of the head. So although I won't be chair, I'll still have the microphone to encourage that level of work as we go forward.
And we
Are
would never stop you from being able to.
I've been around for a long time.
That's true. The other thing too is staying on the millage rate issue. COVID was probably in at least my mind, was the biggest reason not to do anything yet. But also this upcoming request to the community to see if we're missing something. It's worth having those additional funds available if we have missed something, or that we have to make some very dramatic changes to what we've been working on, besides the 0 to 3, which we all believe is something that's extremely important now. So let's get ready for 2023 to talk about that millage rate based on the things that we've found, to ensure that we're not just holding money for sake of having money, but that we're using it and that we have enough funds to continue to grow our programs and to support the community.
Okay, seeing no additional lights, today was a presentation, brief presentation to the full board. And as Laura mentioned, Monday, we'll have a much more detailed presentation to the Finance Committee. So thanks, Laura. I know you've got some heavy work ahead for the next couple of months. So before I turn over to Beth, and I do want to hear from the Chief Executive Officer on the report that she'll make, I'd like to take a little pause, not for a break, but to recognize Beth. And I'm sure by now you have all received the information that Beth Houghton received the key for the city of St. Petersburg from Mayor Kreisman. And so I've had the opportunity to see the video of the presentation. And as much as we as board, I so appreciate Beth and her leadership, particularly her first year this year. I beg your pardon to show the brief video from the city, because I think it lets all of us know a little bit more about Beth's background and how truly fortunate we are to have her. Are we ready? All right, dim those lights.
All right, and Mayor Kreisman, I believe you have one more special award to present today.
We do, Madam Vice Chair. Today, members of council, I am once again honoring with a key to the city someone who has made a tremendous impact in and on our community. And when you put together a list of folks who fit that description, no list of super citizens would be complete without Miss Beth Houghton. Yep, Beth, come on up, please. Thank you. Let me share with you all just a little bit about Beth. She has 3 adult children and 3 grandchildren. She earned her BA with honors in economics and political science from Newcomb College at Tulane University, along with her MBA with high honors from Tulane's Graduate School of Business. She then went to my alma mater, Stetson University College of Law, where she earned her JD with highest honors. Beth now serves as the Chief Executive Officer for the Juvenile Welfare Board of Pinellas County, which is an organization I'm sure you all are familiar with a 74-year history of strengthening the lives of children and families in Pinellas County. Since 1999, the JWB and the City of St. Petersburg Parks and Recs Department have worked together in partnership to support and provide outstanding programming for teen-aged youth in our city. And in her role as CEO, Beth has been a strong advocate for children's issues in underserved families, creating strategic partnerships and overseeing the funding of high-quality programs that benefit hundreds of children and families right here in St. Petersburg. Last year, the city and JWB collectively invested $4.2 million into our teen programs, and we are grateful for that. This investment has allowed us to hire certified teachers and behavioral specialists to assist program participants in homework and tutoring, academic goal setting, school projects, to provide youth development activities and enrichment overlay programs during non-school hours. and offer employment opportunities to our high school youth between the ages of 15 and 19. As a result of this partnership, we have seen a consistent improvement in our teens' FSA, Florida Standardized Assessment scores, and decreased unexcused absences and suspension rates. So again, I want to take this opportunity to say thank you, Beth, and thanks to your JWB staff and board members for your partnership and commitment to help make St. Petersburg truly a city of opportunity where the sun shines on all who come to live, work, and play. But before JWB, Beth came from the St. Petersburg Free Clinic, where she held the top position there for 8 years.
Let this group go.
Oh, my pleasure. Under her leadership, and I know you have your family here with you, and we'll have them stand to be recognized too in a minute. Under her leadership at the Free Clinic, the organization expanded its reach, helping to provide food, shelter, and healthcare to more than 55,000 people on a monthly basis. She previously served as the Chief Financial Officer and General Counsel at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital. And as we all know, she and Scott have given back to our community in so many ways. All you have to do is drive down 4th Street to get a sense of their impact and devotion to St. Petersburg, our children and families. When you're on 4th Street, you'll find a little children's museum there. And I think you all know the one I'm talking about. Great Explorations, the Houghton Wagman Children's Museum. No surprise, Beth served as their president of the board too, as well as on other boards in our community and region, including H. Lee Moffitt Cancer Center and Research Institution. Her dedication to families, to children, to healthcare in general is truly unrivaled. And so, it is my honor to present her with our city's highest honor, the key to the city of St. Petersburg.
This is one of those few times you get to tell your children and grandchildren what community service is all about, and that somebody actually cares about those long meetings and long phone calls. Nobody stands up here and receives an award for community service without extraordinary organizations and all the people they represent. And I'm so glad you mentioned each of those. So it's been my privilege to work with literally thousands of employees and volunteers from All Children's, now Johns Hopkins All Children's, with the St. Petersburg Free Clinic, with Great Explorations, and now it's my privilege to be at the Juvenile Welfare Board, which, even though I was so happy at St. Pete Free Clinic, the opportunity to focus on children was just too overwhelming. I couldn't resist that opportunity. So I thank all of you for the work that you all put in tirelessly. God bless you. And I very much appreciate this and the opportunity to be honored in front of my family. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we've got a few comments. Deputy Mayor Tala.
Hi, Chair. It's good to see you.
Good to be back.
In there, yes. I actually wanted to stack my comments. Just wanted to speak to Masonic Lodge 109. They're no longer here, but wanted to also thank them publicly for the great work that they do in our community and the difference that they make every day. They've touched and changed many lives, and so many in our community are grateful. And I definitely wanted to thank you, Beth, for your example of excellence and leadership. You've blazed so many trails, and I feel fortunate to stand in the, I won't say the shadow of your greatness, because there's nothing about you that casts a shadow. I'll say in the benefit of your light, because you are so wonderful. You were in the C-suite of hospitals long before that was a widespread thing for women to do, and not only in a C-suite position, but as the chief financial officer and general counsel, helping the world understand the potential possibilities, capabilities, and excellence that women bring to the table. I am a beneficiary of your leadership in our community. the other things you've done, the ways we've been able to work together, the great leadership that you and Scott have brought to Grade X, and the philanthropy that in so many ways is unseen, has really shaped and crafted the trajectory and course of our community. And I don't think that the people of St. Pete know enough, and so we can't say it enough. But I am so privileged to understand the impact that you've made, and I am, on behalf of all of our city, so grateful to be able to say thank you to you. Thank you for all you've done.
Vice Chair Driscoll.
Thank you, Chair. Beth, I can't see you over the chair, but I'm so happy that the mayor chose to present the keys to the city with you, to you. It is so incredibly well deserved. When people start talking about women in leadership, you are one of the first people that I think of. Your life and your work have inspired so many women, including me, and I thank you for that. You really are someone that I look up to, that I admire, and that I hope that as you move on to even more and more great things that you do, that I will find more ways that I can help you, because leaders like you don't just look for people to follow you, you look to bring up other leaders with you. And that is so apparent through the Children's Museum, through the St. Pete Free Clinic, through JWB, through so many other things. It's absolutely extraordinary what you have done for the city of St. Petersburg. There are not that many people who can rattle off a list like what you have. You guys are amazing, like you and Scott both. But Beth, for you, and just what you've done with the St. Petersburg Free Clinic alone, which I'm extremely passionate about, and it is such an amazing organization. They are doing fantastic things, and they're in such great hands with Jen. But a lot of the foundation of that success comes from the work that you put in year after year with your heart, as well as with the strength of your wisdom and your ability to know how to get things done. So thank you for everything that you have done and continue to do for our city. And I hope that you'll continue to inspire all of us for many years to come. Thank you.
Well, Beth, I had to first of all congratulate you on an honor that's very well deserved and earned over many years of hard work and tireless dedication. As Vice Chair Driscoll said, you inspire others, but you also motivate others, and your personality and the way that you operate is like a force multiplier, we would say, in the military, because you get so many people. Just look at these people that are in this room that have been with you and have been part of what you've been leading on. So, Mayor Kreisman, thank you for bestowing this honor on a very deserved person. You're a legend here in St. Petersburg, Beth, and thank you for leading. We need more people like you. Thank you.
While they're taking a picture, Chair, I'll mention, because nobody did, she also had great board leadership at Moffitt Cancer Center for some time, and that's such a significant contribution to our community as well.
All right. Well, congratulations to Beth. What do you think? And now let's go back to work.
That's pretty much the way it is. Back to work. No, thank you very much. got the chance to experience that again. I really just have one item I wanted to update the board on or let you know. We are blessed with staff who are extraordinary, and if you tell them to take the mountain, take the hill, they'll take the hill. But what has become, what has been sort of a lingering question at the JWB for some time, and since I walked in the door and then was raised up by Barbara, frankly, a week or so ago, was why is it that we get accredited by a group called COA? It's an extraordinary amount of work, and Barbara coming in with fresh eyes, looking at what just her department needed to do, said, wow, we could do a lot of work in the community that would actually move our strategic plan forward. But instead, we've been doing this accreditation thing that doesn't fit our type of organization. It is designed for direct service, social service organizations. Is not done by any other governmental agency we know of, not done by any of the children's service councils across the state. And we either work to document that this standard or that standard is not applicable to us because it isn't, or we twist ourselves like a pretzel to try to fit something. We instead, though, we are accountable in an extraordinary way to you, to a public board and to public meetings. So it's not a lack of desire to be accountable, but rather to spend our most precious resource, which despite all of the money is really our extraordinary staff, in the work that will make the most difference. So we began the term of getting accredited by COA back in 2011. I think it was driven by staff and the CEO at that time, not by the board. So this is not a matter of approval by the board, but obviously I would want to report that to you that unless you all tell me no, this could not that we're going to not need accreditation, but there's the resource and ways. Across the organization. It's an extraordinary for Mr. Barley.
I'm a new member, and I suppose I may look a stupid ass in this question, but exactly what do you get out of this certification? I mean, what is the purpose for even having it to start?
Well, we
Law
didn't.
enforcement gets
We did not
certified,
come up
then-
with an answer to that question. That is the central question: is why are we doing it? What are we getting out of it?
There must have been some reason it existed back then would have justified students in such a manner with critical returns. That's a lot.
I've been on board, I think, at the same time or a little longer. Right? As former executive for a nonprofit agency funded by Juvenile Welfare Board, our former executive director, it was expectation for neighborhood family service centers, for funded agencies to be certified either by their own government agency or their own governing agency. So I'll use myself as an example. I was the executive director for Brother Big Sisters. And so our agency was certified Big Brother Big Sisters of America. In addition to the accountability we held to Juvenile Welfare Board. So COA certification was an expectation of our former executive director for the agencies provide directors. And so Mercy in her determination felt we're going back to an Welfare Board to do the thing that we're asking our agencies to do. It became clear these vetted people, we are funding agency. We are district tax agency. We have a permanent board that holds that has to accountable for me. So that comes in with you guys, watching staff and more than
understand what we were doing. They wanted by the leadership to be accredited in we're offering clearly and it's clearly understood that we are across the board over the last year have been the community and we'll go through the process.
Okay.